Then talk about that, because the problem of anti-Semitism has become more acute as the conflict in Gaza has continued. Now, you and the Prime Minister both said directly, very publicly to people, please stay away. You said it would be un-British to protest this weekend. And yet we saw on the streets in Manchester, in London, people came out anyway. There were many, many arrests. So how are you planning to curb these protests then? What are you going to do?
I'm specifically going to amend parts of the Public Order Act that will enable the police to place greater restrictions and conditions on protests based explicitly on what we call cumulative disruption. That is to say, regular protests by often the same group of people, often in the same place. So I want to make explicit in the law that those types of protests with cumulative disruption for communities can attract the same conditions and restrictions that apply to other types of protests, so that the police have absolute clarity that they can use cumulative disruption as a reason for restricting those protests.
And those protests in support of Gazans have been taking place regularly. They have been taking place often in the same sites in our city centres. So do you want to be candid about this and just say you are giving the police the power to ban those particular protests? That's the brass tacks of what you're saying.
So this is not about a ban, this is about restrictions and conditions that will enable the police to maybe put further time restrictions, move those protests to other places. The police already have powers on conditions for protests. What I will make clear in the law is cumulative disruption is in and of itself a reason to place restrictions.
But if
there will be protests that relate to the conflict in the Middle East that would now come into the purview of these changes, as other protests as well. So it is always an operational decision for the police to make, but what I'm being explicit about is they can take cumulative disruption into account.
So on the protests that people have seen week after week, some people have looked at them and thought, quite right, those are people standing up for Gazans. Some people have looked at them and thought, as we heard from our panel, actually, those have enabled some people to come out and express hatred towards Jews. What you are doing as the Home Secretary is giving police the powers to move those people on, to disrupt that pattern of regular protest.
What I'm allowing is for the police to be able to take cumulative disruption into account, and it is important, I think, that we make this change so that the right balance can be struck between allowing people the freedom to protest, which is an ancient freedom in this country, but balancing that against the rights of the wider community to be able to go about their business free from intimidation and fear.
The new Green Party leader, Zach Polanski, says it's offensive to ask people to stop joining pro-Palestinian marches. Is it not a dark step to limit the fundamental right to protest in a country that's founded on liberty and the right to say and think what you want?
Well, firstly, I don't think it's offensive to ask people to show a little humanity towards a community that has suffered such a terrible tragedy. That's the first loss of Jewish life, simply for being Jewish, on British soil in centuries, actually, as it happens. It's a very, very long time since that's happened in our country. And I think just because you have a freedom doesn't mean to say you have to use it at every moment of every day. Those people could have just waited a day or two and given people the chance to grieve and process what has happened.
But beyond this weekend,
I don't think there's anything offensive about that. I think that would have been a British response to what we've seen.
But beyond this weekend, what you are suggesting as Home Secretary is a response to limit particular protests that many people believe are part of their fundamental right to go and object to something they see in another part of the world that has horrified them.
Well, look, what we are doing is enabling the police to put more conditions and restrictions, so people will still be able to protest. But I think it is right that we look again at the balance that is being struck at the moment between that right to protest and also the wider rights of our communities as well. So it's always a balance, and I'm recognising that I think that balance has been not necessarily in the right place. I want to have more consistency of police practice when it comes to the conditions they put on these protests, and I have recognised that there is a gap in the law here. There is an inconsistency of practice, and that is why I want to make it absolutely explicit that cumulative disruption is a relevant factor for the police to take into account.
Do you feel remorse, I suppose, perhaps on behalf of the government, that it has taken what's happened this week for you to come to this conclusion?
Look, I am, of course, as devastated as anyone else at what has happened here in Manchester on Thursday. I feel tremendous grief for not just the people of our Jewish community, but for our national community as well. I am very worried about the state of community relations in our country. I know I, as the Home Secretary, have a responsibility to think about the action the government can take to strengthen our communities, to make sure people are well integrated into our society. That is a bigger piece of work for us to do, but I do recognise the sense of people feeling let down. I do recognise that people have been saying for a while that this was only a matter of time. It is devastating to hear our citizens say that, and I will ensure that the government response to what has happened meets the scale of the challenge that is being put to us.
Many people watching have had very deep concerns about Gaza. Many people in your party have had deep concerns about Gaza. You also have had deep concerns about what's happened in Gaza. Is it true you considered resigning the front bench because of the Labour Party's position on the conflict?
I don't think that my personal decisions here are what matter. I'm a member of the government. I was a member of the shadow front bench. I have supported our position.
But is it true?
I think,
I mean,
no,
I think it's not true.
No. I was a member of the shadow front bench. I am a member of this government. I accept collective responsibility. And what I can tell you is that every single day since we've been elected, literally the day after the election, this government has been putting its shoulder to the wheel, engaging actively from the Prime Minister directly in the difficult and very delicate work of diplomacy to try and bring about peace in the Middle East. Our long-term position has been that the only way to ensure the long-term safety and security of all of the people in Israel and all of the people of Palestine is a two-state solution. That is the thing that we have worked on every single day, and I fully support the government in those efforts. I'm a proud part of that government, and I do hope we are able to see a peace process in that region before long.
And these are all delicate issues, of course. There are so many things that we could talk about with you about, and it's your first interview on the show as Home Secretary, so we are running short of time, and if you forgive me asking if we could try and get some brief answers on a few different issues. The Conservatives are putting forward a much bolder plan than yours.